Hey guys, it's time for part two of the music theory for church worship band series. Last time we covered just some basic note theory, what the numbers of the notes were on the chord in a scale, what a major and minor chord were, and some of the basic terminology there. This time I'd like to start by talking about what is worship. We call ourselves a worship band. And I'm afraid that we've sort of taken that word and made it mean a lot less than it was originally intended to mean. Nowadays in culture, you hear people ask, what is the worship style at your church? Oh, it's contemporary or it's traditional. What they mean and what we mean when we talk about that is what's the music? But worship isn't just music. Worship is everything we do. Worship is the appreciation and love of God for who He is, and what He's done for us. And it's disappointing to think that we've made it so much smaller than that by saying, well, it's a couple songs that we play before the sermon and a couple songs we play after. Worship is to encompass our entire lives. The way you eat ice cream is to be an act of worship. You're supposed to appreciate how God made so many flavors taste so good in your mouth. The way that you play with your kids is supposed to be worship. Certainly the way that we sing hymns and psalms and songs of praise, that is worship, but that's a small part of what worship is, and we want to make sure that we use that word rightly and that we're thinking about that word rightly in our minds when we're talking about what we do. So our next lesson in theory is going to be to talk about some intervals and then some of the more advanced chord theory. When you see a chord chart for a song, how great is our God, or whatever, there's always letters and notation written over the words. Obviously the guitar player and piano player have to know what that means, the bass player has to know what that means so that they can play along. It turns out that the singers also have to know what that means, because when we start getting into which part you're going to sing over or under a certain melody line, it matters what chord is being played underneath that, so you know what notes are in that chord, so you know what part to sing. So first we'll look at intervals. We'll go back and be in the key of C just to make things easy again. We've got our C note. The next one, if we play them together, is a half step. That's obviously kind of dissonant. We'll try to avoid doing that too much. We've got a whole step here, a minor third, a major third, and we get to F. That puts us in the situation of a perfect fourth. Now we'll talk about perfect fourths, perfect fifths, and octaves. Those three intervals have some mathematical issues with them that they're sort of, the way the wavelengths lay together, they are particularly unforgiving of any problems with intonation. And that's why, unless we've got a reason, we try to avoid living in that space where we're hanging out in a perfect fourth or a perfect fifth. It just sort of, to the Western ear, to the modern music ear, just sounds a little strange. It's not, that's much more comfortable for our ears and the music that we're used to listening to. So fourth, fifth, octaves, we try to not live in that world any more than we have to. So we've got the fourth, and then there's the augmented fourth or diminished fifth, perfect fifth, augmented fifth, sixth. This can sometimes be called a minor seven or a flat seven, or we'll get into where that lays in the chord theory later. A major seven, which sort of puts us in the same category here, because the C note is also, we've got it's a half a step here, or it's a major seventh here. It's the same kind of dissonance either way, and then back to an octave. So there are some additions to some of the chords. Sometimes you'll see a strange chord that maybe we'll say C2, and you don't really know what that means. So we've got our C major chord. When they talk about a C2, that typically means that you take the third and move it down to the second. So it's C major, C2. Guitar players use that chord a lot, and it's because of the way that G and C are made on a guitar. In the key of G and the key of C, which are very common keys, You've got your C chord and your G chord on the guitar. To go back and forth, I have to move all my fingers, and I'm moving them all the way across the fretboard. There's an easier way to voice that G than this. We simply pull in one more finger and we put it on the 3rd fret on the B string here, giving us a D note, which is different from the B note that was there. They're both in the G chord, so it doesn't change the fact that it's a G chord, it just changes the voicing a little bit. You know, we talked about inversions and voicings yesterday. As long as it's got those 3 notes, the 1, 3, and 5 of the chord, it's still that chord. So we're still in G chord here. But to get to the C, instead of moving all my fingers all the way across the fretboard, I just move my first 2 fingers over one string. So I've got a G, and that's more or less a C. The difference is that's a D note. There's no D in a C chord, so it makes it a C2. Okay, or it could be, sometimes they call it a C add 2. You will occasionally see it listed as a C add 9. Technically that's incorrect, because a C, technically it's got a 7 in it, and we'll get to that in a second. So we've got the C2 chord, then move the 3rd up back to a half a step, makes a C minor, C major. If we move that up to the 4th, then this becomes what's called a suspended chord. And a suspended chord is exactly that. It sort of feels like it's hanging there, it's waiting to go somewhere. So you often hear that, and then we'll say that it resolves. So you've got a chord suspended, and it resolves. So that's your suspended chord. Then we'll come back to just the C chord. If we move the 5th up a half a step, then we've got C augmented, and sometimes you see that written as C AUG, C augmented. The little sister or the cousin to that chord is the diminished chord, which will take a C, we'll go to C minor, and then we'll pull that 5th down a half a step. So we've got a minor 3rd here, and a minor 3rd here. That's a C diminished chord. When we go to C, and then C augmented, now we've got 2 major thirds. Here's a major 3rd, and here's a major 3rd. So that's typically used as a leading chord. If we take that highest tone, the G, and we move it up to an A, that technically becomes an A minor. We've just revoiced that, right? But if we add in the G, and then add the 6, that becomes a C6. You'll see that sometimes. And then sometimes you'll see a C7. When you see C7, that implies that the 7th tone is flat. The jazz guys call that a dominant 7. You may hear it as a major minor 7, because you have a C major chord and then the flat 7. And then you've got a C major 7, which is your 7th tone in the scale, and that will sometimes be called a major 7. And then you end up with the C major scale again, just a note on top. If we add the 9th, so we start with the C7, add the 9, and that's this D note here again. So that's not a 2, now it's a 9, because we've added in the 7th. The last thing I want to get to is sometimes you'll see like C/E. What does that mean? Oops. So we've got a C scale here, and that assumes that there's a C in the bass. When you're playing the bass and it just says C, well, you're going to play a C in the bass. If you see a C/D, everybody else plays a C scale and you play a D in the bass, which is sort of a leading tone. Same thing if you see a C over E, it means a C chord over E in the bass, and that's sort of a leading tone too. So we can change the whole feel of that chord just by moving the bass note. Okay, so that's as far as we'll go in this lesson, and thanks for watching.